Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 22 of my Pyanodon's playthrough. In this episode, we are going to test out the coal processing technology, as well as finish up the de-ashification of all of our ore processing. Enjoy. Well, I believe we were having power problems. Of course, it's gone now, because we caught up with all of the resources we needed. But nonetheless, our factory clearly is short on power. And we did research something related to it. The raw coal stage 1, and I mentioned that this might seem like it's good for making more power, but it kind of isn't. It's a surprisingly sus technology, and let's talk about that. The end result of this is essentially coal, and there's really not that many places that it goes into our factory. Besides the laughably small amount of it that goes into these rubber stoppers, you might have trouble thinking, where else does coal go into? It's because it's a intermediate product right now, that when we are processing raw coal to make tar, it turns into regular coal and then comes around here, and then the regular coal gets turned into coke. A potential use case is to use this process to replace the first step of coal and then send it into here. However, that has its own problems, and let me calculate it real quick to show you. So here's a sample build, and the thing that sets up the numbers is the 15 electric mining drills, which gives us 60 raw coal, or in other words, 4 belts of it. And that's what we're doing now, where we have 2 belts going into that setup and 2 into that. So this makes them equivalent. That doing this will produce a lot of coal, which then turns into 24 coke. And then the extra byproducts are burned, the coal dust and the crushed coal, to make steam, because that's ultimately what would happen with them. And also, to make this comparable, I have sent the syngas through an oil burner. We don't have those yet, but I just wanted to turn it all into steam so we can then turn the steam into electricity. So the way of looking at this setup is that it will produce 60 coal and turn it into 24 coke. And if we go to our existing setup, I added the miners in there to be the same, and I'm having us burn the syngas in the same way. That for our 60 coal, we're only getting 10.81, so this seems better because we're getting more coke, but the tar tells a different story, where we're getting 296 tar out of this one. However, our original setup is actually 529. And that's actually pretty crazy, because the reason why we're running this setup is for the tar. It's not for the coke. The coke that we want actually comes from the tar processing. And it actually is worse than that, because since it's making a lot less tar, it's actually making a lot less syngas too. So burning all of the byproducts that this creates will generate 158 megawatts, whereas the setup we have now actually generates 242. And yes, we don't have the oil burners, but we're still using this syngas for our furnaces, so we do care about the energy amount in there. Also, if you look at the power consumption of the build, where this produces 242 and consumes 37.4, you can say that roughly this setup produces 200 megawatts of power, of net power anyway, whereas this one produces 158 and consumes 54, so you can say it produces roughly 100 megawatts in net power. So that's kind of bad. Really, the only thing that this does is give you more coke for less input raw coal, but again, if you did the tar processing, I don't think that would apply. So let's delete that since we're not doing it. However, there is another use of coal here, and that is to process it from raw coal into the regular coal and then send all of that through a power plant. And previously I said that it wasn't very good and not worth doing, and now we'll find out why. So we have this set based on 2 belts of input coal, and that's how all of our plants operate, where it requires 30 secondary crushers to break that down into 10 crushed coal and 20 regular coal. And I consider this the output, and then this coal dust is like an extra. That way it's 30 into 30, so you don't have to worry about that. And then it goes through a reasonably large set of boilers between the 2 of them, and it gets turned into power. And of course, we need to remember that the ash gets sorted. So what does that give us? Well, it produces 70 megawatts and consumes 26. So it has a net output of around 44 megawatts, whereas the setups we're using now produce 45 and consume 12, so they make roughly 33 megawatts. So you can see how going from 33 net megawatts to 44 net megawatts is kind of bad considering all of the space and specifically all of the secondary crushers that go into it. Like, is this a net positive? Yes, but not really worth it. We are very close to having new technology for actually making different types of power plants rather than ones running on raw coal, but we're not quite there yet. Nonetheless, we are a little short on power, and since I've talked about it, how about we build one of these, just to show what it would be like. And it will help the factory. It's just not really worth it due to its size, but it is a positive for the factory, so let's do it. Although I already know through experience that this isn't a good idea, ultimately you don't really know if something's going to be a good idea or not until you try it out. Just as an example here, 30 of these crushers is going to be 1,200 steel plates. Each power plant needing 1,200 steel plates just to make a few extra megawatts is pretty bad. Not to mention, of course, all of the other stuff that's on that list too. For example, we also need a massive stack of duralumin and a massive stack of circuit boards and basically just a whole bunch of everything. For a measly power plant that's barely putting out 40 megawatts, this is pretty bad. Alright, we need to build this somewhere. And it makes sense to put it next to where our coal mine is because that's where we actually have spaces left. But this whole power plant's only going to need 2 belts. And we can do it anywhere, but we want to be careful that it doesn't get in the way of anything, so putting it up here and extending it out seems to make sense. And it's easy to underestimate how much space this build is going to take. So it's something like that, but we need to have a total of 30 of them. So that gets us 8, and that gives us 16. And to make it look squarish, we'll stick with that, and then put another one right up there. The belts can combine, and oh boy, there's everything we need for one power plant. And certainly you could smash things in tighter than I'm doing here, but it is my general practice to leave spaces between the buildings in Pi. It's easier to move around and the caravans appreciate it as well. But yeah, looking at the scale of this, do you already understand why I'm saying this is a bad idea? It's cool though, I will say that. No matter how bad the idea is, it is cool. And that is ultimately why I am choosing to do it. Because I talked about it, and also because I knew it was a technology in the tech tree, and a new player who might look at that technology might think it's actually good for something, when in reality, it kind of isn't. So I wanted to show what you would actually do with it if you chose to use it for anything. Now, it is a good technology later, when you have the next tier of technology beyond that one. Then it certainly is good. It's just not right now. Also, another mark against a power plant like this is it just takes too long to build. When you're in the pre-bot era and you have to make everything by hand. I guess if you have an early bots mod, it's not so bad, but I would be done already if I was building a more standard raw coal power plant. But nope, here I am. So this monstrosity is complete, and now we need to turn it into power. It's important to note, and certainly you don't want to mess this up, that this fuel is much higher quality than raw coal, which means that the belt density is higher, and as a result, you can get even more furnaces in. And I probably should have picked a power plant that actually made electricity, but because the belt density is higher, we're going to have 30 items a second across 40 boilers, which means we actually don't need to have 2 inserters anymore. So that much is improved, but also the furnace stack is much longer. And of course, like before, it's going to have ash. It needs to have the side switch, and then a whole nother set of them goes in. So you can see how much bigger this setup is compared to the other ones, which is just this. It's bad. I don't want my criticisms of the power plant to sound like I'm just doing something terrible and I don't want to. No, part of me does actually want to build this. I think it will be legitimately entertaining to see it run. So I am actually perfectly fine with it. And in fact, there is a lot of satisfaction in building something and doing it well, even if that something is kind of a flawed concept. Nonetheless, I like the challenge of building something and seeing it operate. So I am absolutely having fun doing this. I wonder if part of it is me just wanting to improve. Like when I hear that something is bad or even come to that conclusion by myself, I still kind of want to try to make it less bad. So here, because I'm going to try to make it less bad, let's send the ash this other direction in attempt to crunch the setup's size down and make it more squarish. When this thing gets going, you're like, wow, it's so big, it's making so much power. I'm like, no. I mean, it is, to be clear, it is making a lot of power, but it also has a huge input of power as well. So that is an important thing to consider when it comes to anything in Pi, is what is the net power after all of the processing is done. And sometimes that calculation can be quite difficult if it involves like a bunch of steam, for example. So I am hesitant to do extra processing for something if it's not immediately clear that it's actually a good thing. This is a little easier because it's just electricity, but nonetheless, you always need to remember, what was that input electricity requirement to run the thing? And is that actually a good idea in the end? First time using electric inserters. As a result, I need to figure out where to put all the power poles. Of course, with an eye of making it as absolutely square as possible. Because if it's not square, then why even bother? That's how I look at it anyway. Okay, that much is done. And the final part is the ash separation, and there's nothing special about this. It's the same thing we've done before. It can go in here. Hopefully all of this is good to go. I mean, it looks cool, right? I think so. So a setup this big, you would think, oh man, we need like 4 coal belts for this. Nope, only need 2. Man, what happened to all the iron? Clogged up on stone. That's interesting because it seems to be going at full power. Ah, because we just didn't connect that belt. That makes sense. So there we go. Crisis averted. That is a little frustrating that we weren't actively making things that we needed there, but oh well. It is kind of important to keep the factory constantly producing stuff. That limits the size that setups need to be. And it's kind of funny me saying that with setups this big, and I'm like, oh, that was bad. The factory was idle for 5 minutes. How will we ever recover from this? But the same concepts apply regardless of how big your factory is. That you pretty much always want to be producing stuff if you need to be producing the stuff. All right, are we ready? So we have 2 belts of raw coal that come in through these 2 lines here. Each crusher takes it in and crushes it down, and it sorts it between the coal dust, which goes on this outside belt, and the things we want to burn on this one. And we do need to do a side switch. So the way that it works is that the top line and bottom line goes on one belt, and then switch sides, and then the center one just does the side switch at the end. Meanwhile, the dust isn't being burned as a part of this process. It'll just get sent to other power plants to burn to keep the numbers nice and clean. So they will get put on this one belt in the middle, and right here the top machine and the bottom machine also go in the middle. We need to connect that, and same thing happens up there. And then the 2 outputs will be holding for us at the power plant. So let's see if it works. And I guess that was an achievement, so I'm kind of glad we're doing this. Not that the achievements matter, but it feels good. And that is a lot of noise and a lot of processing for this. It's so much work for so little gain, but it's cool. So we're doing it. Just once though. I am not doing this a second time. So the side switch worked for here, and it looks like it's working for the bottom one as well. It is kind of hard to tell, but there are the 2 types of coal in there, and they will be picked up by whatever boiler decides to pick them up. So in they go. Of course, we've seen this before, so it's all the same. And we have the 2 sides of ash, and instead of doing a side switch and continuing, they are combining in the middle and going towards the ash processors. And this is slightly too many boilers, so the ones on the end may not run as much as the ones back here. But that's basically how that works. So now let's hook up the ash, and this is a simplified plant where all of the ash byproducts get sent onto this one belt here. So let's connect the other ones as well to put all of the byproducts on this belt. And there we go. So we'll keep it going. It'll look something like this. And it is true that I did not account for the dust in the calculations. I probably should have, to be a little bit more fair to this process. but it's clearing out as you see. It does make a substantial amount of coal dust. I mean, it's not a ton, but it's certainly more than these other setups do. All power plants already consume their own coal dust, but since this dust is a worse fuel quality than the coal that is processed, we are going to send this into the standard raw coal power plants. And up it goes, and it'll be sent into whatever needs it. And yeah, there's the end, and it has been sorted. So that is what a power plant like that might look like. Let's see what the numbers look like if we were burning the coal dust. It's technically now making slightly more ash, and I'm not going to re-burn the coal dust again because that's not being done here either. And honestly, the numbers are very similar, so you can kind of not include that. So we can just move this up and down to see that without burning the dust, the power output was 70. And if we do burn the dust, it's 74.5. So the net power output is about 48 megawatts compared to about 33 with burning raw coal. That makes it better, but not really. Our power plant is complete, and hopefully you found that a little entertaining. It is fully functional. There's not much else we can upgrade as far as our ores with our current technology, other than just electrifying them. And since our fuel seems to be pretty good, I kind of feel like we should continue to upgrade them. Since we're here, let's do aluminum. We have the better drills now, and we might actually want to consider going harder on this because things are a lot more compact now. And without longhand inserters, the practical limit is 15 ore a second, so let's do that. Let's try to keep that caravan outpost in the same spot. One advantage of upgrading this is that you see the effect of the, let's call it strip mining. It creates strips of ore, and if we have electric miners, it won't do that. It will fully consume the whole patch without us having to actually move anything, and that is certainly an advantage. And how about let's just put in more miners than are necessary, just to have the whole patch covered. So in it goes, mining a bunch of aluminum. Of course, it just occurred to me, believe it or not, we are in the splitter era, and we can actually easily handle more than one belt of resources at a time now. But nonetheless, you understand that it's hard for me to get out of that mindset. So I went with 15, but also we really don't want to be cranking this up when we have kind of bad technology. Oh, hello. So we're gonna stick with this. This is a quite acceptable number. In goes the ore. Inserter limited, so the furnaces don't go all the time, but that's pretty good. And how's the power? Well, okay for now. Oh wow, getting lots of spoilage. Oh my goodness. I'm guessing like the entire belt right here has gone bad, or pretty much. Oh yeah, they're pretty low. So now they are gradually getting sent in here to be reprocessed. And that seems fine, as long as it's not blocked up anywhere. But now it's kind of hard to remember what parts of our factory haven't been upgraded with electric mining and fluid furnaces. So let's just do a factory search of entity and say we are looking for burner miner drills. And we've got them all. And now let's search for fluid mining drill Mark 1s. And we've got one more mine, and that is our zinc. Further, we can search for entity stone furnace. And it's the same. So we've got one more upgrade to go. And looking at zinc, it would be something like this. However, remembering that our science setup is expecting a lot of our resources to expand in production, that tin is now above the line at 5 per second, and lead is certainly above the line at 7.5. Copper's not quite there, it's close, but that means that pretty much the only resource on here that we're not making up to that standard is zinc. So we might want to consider just making a big zinc build here. Looking at zinc processing, it's actually a little ways away. I mean, it's not that far, but we're not going to be able to do it immediately. So for the purposes of our circuits, how about we bump this up to 30 or 2 full belts of input? Now that I talked about it and reminded myself that we can easily handle multiple full belts of resources, let's do that. Since this is the last thing that we're upgrading, I kind of want to come up here and at least pick up these miners. Wait, why aren't these going? No aromatics, huh? Really? Oh yeah, I think that just needs to be connected. I probably just pulled it off the wrong pipe. Well, that was a blessing in disguise because it cleared all of these machines out. But I want to pick them up first because the Mark 1 drills go into the Mark 2 ones. And since this is the last upgrade that we're doing for a while, this would get them out of our inventory. Because otherwise we're just going to be hanging on to them for a while. Because we've removed all of these ash producers, it means that, oh wow, our inventory is completely full. It means that these two solid separators at the end are no longer required. This isn't an entirely balanced two groups of miners, but I also don't think this is going to run at full power. Also, as the mine drains, it's not going to be balanced anyway, so there's probably no point in trying to make it perfect. It looks kind of funny having this just sit here, but the pump on the right is our input for fuel, and the pump on the left is just the standard aromatics pipe. And we'll input our ores into the back. We'll need our fairly compact furnaces here, and it is actually kind of amazing that with just this, we can process 30 ore a second, although I believe we need one more here. Anyway, the aromatics are back in the machines. Of course, that's the wrong side. So in goes the fuel, and in goes the ores. That is one advantage of using these gas furnaces is, man, are they fast. It doesn't seem very fast when it's doing this, but this is a big craft. And there we go. Of course, we're so low on the zinc that we're not actually consuming any of the tin anymore. But to the right goes the tin. This will come down, extend out, connect on there. And is it the right side? Nope. We have to do tin on the left side of the belt and zinc on the right. So if it does that, it will now be correct. It can go straight in. And I was hoping to avoid dirtying my inventory, but oh well. Pulling up the belt here doesn't matter a whole lot, but it really does matter here on our bus line, because that's one more slot we can use for something else. And that is absolutely worth moving the belt around. And there we go. Our factory has been fully electrified, or at least no more burners. The fluid mining drills actually aren't that bad considering we have 170 of them, which kind of shows you the scale of what we've done here. But it's the 323 electric miners that are doing all the energy consumption, and that's probably because most of them are generating coal for power. Otherwise, the power output's holding out, and we have basically a 0.5 gigawatt factory now. So we are looking good. It took a little bit of work to do that, but it feels rather nice not having any ash producers anymore scattered around the factory. Now they are all concentrated in very specific areas. Not to mention we have a use for all of our fuels, and it actually looks like gasoline has run out. This opens up the possibility for one more upgrade we can do, and it is power related. However, that's going to have to wait till the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.